What's the most dangerous place in your country? I would say the various mountain trails that appeal to Norwegians and tourists. So many people hike these trails in remote parts of the country without proper equipment and knowledge. My girlfriend is an experienced mountain hiker and told me of an instance where she was walking a trail with a friend where they met a family. My girlfriend and her friend were both in proper clothes that are water and wind resistant. They wore good hiking boots and were carrying backpacks with equipment like maps, compass, provisions, tools, etc. The family they met were foreign tourists, a couple with 3 kids. The kids ranged from 6 years old to an infant that was no more than 9 months old. They were all wearing shorts, t-shirt and simple shoes. I think the wife was even wearing flip-flops. On this specific trail they were basically wandering from cabin to cabin. These cabins are spread across the trail and managed by a tourism association. They provide overnight accommodation and meals for hikers. In many cases it is a full day's hike from cabin to cabin. And it is exactly on one of those hikes that this family was going on. They were clearly unprepared for this trip and had to be airlifted out by an emergency helicopter. What most people aren't aware of is that death is not off the table in these circumstances. People might end up in a spot of bad weather, like rain or snow even in mid-July, or they deviate from the path and injure themselves or die from exposure or falling. I almost visited years ago but found out it was mandatory to carry a firearm because of the bears. The only travel guide in English had a large section dedicated to bear attacks. It detailed the story of 2 men who were cornered by a bear on opposite sides of the same cleft in the rocks with one handgun between them. The guy with the gun shot the bear in the head, which annoyed it. He had time to throw the gun to his friend before it attacked him. The other guy then shot the bear, which annoyed it enough to drop guy 1 and go for guy 2. They kept throwing the gun to each other until they were out of ammo. I booked the trip to Barcelona instead. I've lived in Colorado near the mountains for a long time. Almost every year there are stories of people who went for a hike and never came back. Even if you're not really climbing, just hiking those peaceful valleys following a creek. If you don't know what you're doing, it's really easy to get disoriented. The weather can turn really fast, and unless you're a local, you wouldn't see it coming. And winter days are short. Having gone out for a 3-hour hike in a peaceful valley in nice weather, now you find yourself lost in a dark night in the middle of a snowstorm in sub-zero temperatures. Plenty of people have frozen to death in those circumstances. No need to even mention bears, coyotes, mountain lions, rattlesnakes, black widows and other interesting fauna. Nah, I'd argue Central Australia. You're literally hundreds of kilometers from the next person, and possibly thousands from the nearest medical help. Something as small as a twisted ankle can possibly kill you. If you're living off the land, it's also hot, dry, and full of all sorts of things that want to fuck your day up. My mother-in-law had to dodge a cow and crashed onto a ditch on a shortcut she took in the Northern Territory. She spent the afternoon, the night and most of the next day on the side of the road. Temps got above 40 C, and she only had 2 liters of water for her and the dog. She says in this time only 2 cars passed her, both missing her car completely, before she managed to flag the third down. Mind you, this was the main highway between 2 towns. Her dog also ran away, and got lost in the bush. She got to town, panicked, dehydrated and sobbing. My wife and I had just reported her missing because she hadn't checked in over 24 hours, and we had to calm her down, cancel the police checks of the highway, then call her back to sort out how the hell she was going to get back on the road. In the eastern part of Kazakhstan, there is a place, Dead Lake. It is small in size, surrounded by beautiful scenery, far from residential buildings, but it has a bad reputation. People drown in the lake almost every year. Locals try to bypass this strange place, which attracts tourists. The water in the Dead Lake, even in the summer heat, is simply icy. There are no fish, no algae, trees along the shore do not grow, and even mosquitoes. Divers who decided to dive say, in a couple of minutes they catch their breath. There is not enough air, for some unknown reason. There is a similar lake, zone in Northern California near Mammoth Lakes, which is a caldera, volcanically active. A lake called Horseshoe Lake has an area that emits a lot of CO2, which apparently in high concentrations can knock you out really fast. I've been there, but I don't like tempting fate, so I didn't stick around or go down by the water. The area was kinda bowl-shaped with a still lake at the bottom, and a ring of dead trees along one side. https://www.latams.com/archives/la xpam 2006 April 08 mirisks 8 story.html. Moldova here, from the other side of the river, nowadays the Republic of Moldova, so arguably more dangerous villages. Can confirm what my neighbor said above. 99% chance you can walk outside at night in any village and be fine, especially as a tourist. You might get heckled or run into some drunk guys if you pass the local bars, but otherwise it's not more dangerous than your average place. Avoid areas with nightclubs and definitely don't go clubbing alone in villages. In cities it's fine as long as you don't piss off the wrong people. As a general rule, maybe stick to just Chisinau and avoid Balti City in the north, and the Transnistrian region. Not sure who this is for, as I would assume that if you're visiting the Republic of Moldova, you know someone local. I've been to rural Moldova, the Romanian province, not the country, and while I would say some villages and small towns looked sketchy at first, I've never really felt like I was in actual danger. People seemed willing enough to help a foreigner out if they could, and despite some decay here and there I saw no casual violence and such. I would imagine inner city Bucharest has areas which are way more dangerous to walk around at night. Not just slipping in. The water is very fast there, the rocks also overhang by quite a bit, so if you go in, panic scramble upwards, you're likely to have gone under some of the rock and then get trapped from panicking, not to mention the force of the water knocking you against the not-so-smooth parts underneath. The water's murky, so it's hard enough to see anything in there too. Edit, pretty sure Tom Scott has done a fascinating video on it. West Baltimore. They had a free guns for cash exchange at a police station a few years back. Someone handed in a grenade launcher. Edit, I'm being told it was a rocket launcher. Also, free sounds weird in my sentence. I meant to say if you had a felony, or otherwise was not supposed to have a gun, they gave you the cash, and you were free from prosecution. There were no questions asked. I work in West Baltimore, and while I love the city, the west side is rough. ETA. I do remember this incident. It wasn't a grenade launcher. It was an already spent single-use shoulder-fired recoilless rifle, similar to a M72 Law or similar. The thing had already been fired, basically turning it into military memorabilia. Some enterprising individual in possession of it, they are cheap as shit in terms of value on the second-hand market, thought correctly that they would get more money by turning this in than by selling it to some other collector. The Baltimore PD, incompetent fucks that they are, paid a bunch of money for a non-functioning piece of garbage, then got to claim they took a rocket launcher off the streets. If it was an M37 flare launcher, then it is legal to own. Buy. The grenades are a different story. I've seen articles claiming a rocket launcher was turned in. Look at the article and it's a spent law tube, which is a single-use weapon, so don't lose any sleep over it. Edit, found it, probably. https://www.reddit.com/r/news/comments/shane9b6bf/baltimore_gun_yields_a_rocket. It's the Outback in Oz. In the USA you can drive across country and you can see heaps of nice places, green grass, full infrastructure like cities and fuel stops etc. In the Outback, no, just no, you can drive for a very long time and see nothing. If you ever do decide to drive any further than a few hours away from the coast, be aware that if your car breaks down, you should never leave the car. There's nothing to find and you'll die of heat really fucking fast. At least if you're in the car, you can be found. Sorry to hear it, frown. I worked there for a bit, maybe 12 to 15 years ago, and I did have some sketchy encounters and got robbed once, but overall I had a great social and professional experience that didn't deter me from wanting to go back someday. Also, the passion fruits were the best ones I had ever tasted in my life. I've been paying attention to what's going on there, and I really hope it gets better for you all soon. This is kinda scary, but 10 years ago I went to Delhi with a group of others, and we were supposed to go clubbing with a politician's son, and his friends. I'm assuming he was related to one of our group members and nice enough, and said he would bring security with him, but our travel leaders flat out refused, which sucked to us early 20-year-olds. Grateful now that we probably dodged something really bad. I used to work there, and for a little while I would tell people that it's not as scary as you'd think because it's practically a ghost town during the day. But then a woman was raped outside the liquor store in broad daylight, and then the whole building was on lockdown due to a gang shooting, and then there have been shootings of kids aged 11, 6, and 1 within the last year, and those are only the ones I can think of off the top of my head. I will say, though, that when I got into a minor car accident there, at least 20 people stopped to check if I was okay or if they could help get my car out. Back tire was stuck in gravel after I broke a rim. I wish stats like this showed towns as well as cities, but most news or crime stats sites focus on cities, pretty much ignoring towns. It can help create an overly idyllic view of small-town life and overstate the violence in cities compared to small towns. It can seem like it's not safe to walk the streets alone unless you look at the per capita rate of both towns and cities. Philadelphia, and here, that's where the hardcore drug users are. There are actually people who come to Philly for those drugs and never leave. I remember driving past and seeing so many people just lying in the ground. Saw one dude passed out with a needle still in his arm. It's a scary sight. Howdy, I'm from Canada. Going off of a hunch here, but probably the ice islands between the Beaufort Sea and Greenland. It's Canada's northernmost point and is comprised of melting ice caps, frequent blizzards, lack of vegetation, and a whole lot of nothing for hundreds of miles, except for a few rocket-detecting satellite towers that were meant to inform our neighbors, the U.S., of potential nuclear attacks during the Cold War. It's pretty hairy up there even in summertime. There's a great novel by a guy who paddled from the west coast of Hudson's Bay all the way over the top westward to Toucan WT. Crazy Times and Stories, especially the abandoned U.S. military radar bases from July days, and the animal encounters, the frostbite, the starvation. He very nearly died within sight of Touc as freeze up was happening, with a polar bear on his ass. Paddle the Arctic, that was his second book. His first one is Paddle the Amazon from the Red River in Manitoba down to the Gulf and up the Amazon. Certifiably insane that guy is. Ireland. Some would say Belfast. It's been called the terrorist capital of Europe because we've had a lot of issues with sectarian and unionist versus Republican violence. As far as I know, it has calmed down in recent years though, and that title is definitely hyperbole. I'd say the deadliest place in Ireland today is on the road. We lose a lot of people every year to RTAs and not just drunk drivers. I'm not sure if we're just terrible at driving or if it's something to do with how we build or maintain our roads, but it's frequently the biggest killer. Louisiana swamps. Nearly impossible to live in if someone dropped you off in the middle of them. There is an infinite amount of cottonmouths and mosquitoes. No dry wood to build a fire, feet will be constantly wet and waterlogged, very limited food resources even as a skilled survivalist, many parasites, no clean drinking water, humidity like you've never experienced, and also alligators. It would be absolute misery and you would only want to die, and you would die slowly. I picked this over the deserts and cold regions of America, simply because you can at least die quicker out there, and won't be as miserable and itchy when you die. Australia, the fucking outback, dude. Like, people comprehend the distances, but they don't comprehend the desolation. There is nothing out there. Europe, to go between Darwin and Alice Springs is in the same state in Australia. In Europe, you drive across 8 fucking countries in the same distance. In America, that distance will cover 8 states and about 40 cities. In Australia you go through 8 towns that are really only a pub and a fuel station. People don't realize that when there is a sign that says 600 kilometers to the next fuel, it means there are 600 fucking kilometers until the next fuel. It's not 600 until the next big stop, next big town. It's 600 until you will see another living soul, another 600 until you see anything even approximating civilization. It's 45 plus degrees Celsius out there in the day, but at night it can get down to 5 degrees Celsius. You travel through the outback, you have a spare tire, you have water, you have sleeping gear, you have a first aid kit, and these days, you take an emergency GPS locator beacon. It's not something you fuck with, it's a standard drive, but you take what you need to survive. Every single time. I've done the drive from Darwin to the rest of Australia and back 4 times now. I have been lucky nothing went wrong. No tires, no engines, nothing. But I did hit a wedge-tailed eagle and snapped the 6-foot fiberglass UHF aerial clean in half. Boom. My comms were gone. My friend hit a fucking cow in a VW MRX. It tore the bull bar off, went over the roof, and hit the tailgate so hard it ripped the tub off his ute excepting one bolt. Germany, probably everywhere but especially forests. Why? Because lots of major cities still have sleepers in them. WW2 bombs that went undetected and undetonated up till now. The city where I live has frequent bomb deactivations when they happen to find another one again. They say there's still more than 1,000 undetected till now, and it's a miracle not one went off uncontrolled yet. Forests can be even more dangerous, especially ones that are big and rather unexplored. Lots of bombs, mines and ammunition still in there. So if you're in Germany and plan to walk through big forests, be aware of any danger signs and don't take them lightly. They are there for a reason. I'm going to go out on a limb here for the USA and say Northern Alaska. Sure, you have Detroit, St. Louis, New York, Oakland. Just naming some cities known for having crime in the wrong part of town. But if you aren't prepared, or even if you are you ready for bears, wolves, wolverines, and even angry moose that could end your life in a heartbeat? There is no street smart if a polar bear or pack of wolves catches your scent and decides you are a Lunchable. Gotta be careful and armed at all times if venturing outside. And even that doesn't guarantee you will survive an attack. Then you get the extreme cold weather and isolation. You drive off a semi-remote road in the winter. You very well might freeze to death in -50-degree weather before anyone finds you. Let alone the darkness all winter leads to depression and high suicide rates. Oh. And Alaska has some pretty notorious serial killers. Yeah, northern Alaska, outside of the city or village, is dangerous as hell. Sweden. Either the vast highland plains up north. The altitude is high enough to be above the tree line, but the mountains are relatively flat from millions of years of erosion. This leaves little protection from winds and rain. Also, when the mist comes, you have little chance of navigating without a compass or the glaciers of the far north. Some of the cracks can be over 30 meters deep, slippery, and worst of all shifting. The glacier is under such pressure from its own weight that the ice is semi-liquid. The crack could therefore slowly be closing in on you. Sadly, the glaciers have been getting considerably smaller in later years. Skeptical. I live in New Jersey, USA. The city of Camden near me is in the top of the list of gun violence. At night all the shops close around 7 p.m. and use heavy steel shutters to keep from being robbed. The police stop answering calls after 9 and the streets become a lawless land with people riding four-wheelers around the streets. Some of the place looks a lot like Fallout 4. https://b/crickage9e. Here's a video of a guy driving around Bankstown, Punchbowl in Sydney, NSW, grew up there for 20 years. Last 5 of them there was all sorts of insane activity. I lived on the nicer, quieter side of Canterbury Road, which is the main that runs through both areas, and it definitely got more dicey as the years went on, from late 90s and into the middle 2000s onwards. Sadly, in streets nearby were many shootings, earrings being blown off, murders, lots of gangs and drugs. People defend it and I don't know why. I love it, and I love the memories of my childhood, but after being followed home from Riverwood countless times, and the sheer amount of drugs and gang activity that does operate there, and has not improved, it's a bad place. I would always deter people from moving there.